I was awake before the streetlights even flickered off, the kitchen already humming with the soft warmth of the oven. At 3 a.m., the first carrots were peeled. The beef bones simmering in the large stock pot I'd dragged out of storage the week before. My grocery list had cost nearly $500, well over what I had set aside from my modest Social Security check, but I had stretched it, calculating every portion and substituting where I could. This anniversary party for Marielle was supposed to be special, and in my mind, special meant flawless. Daniel had shuffled past me in his bathrobe, murmuring a sleepy greeting, barely aware of the orchestration happening around him. Marielle, of course, had sent 3 separate text messages since midnight, each adding names to the guest list, friends from book clubs, co-workers, even Daniel's college friends I had never met. Oh, and invite the Hendersons too. One text read casually, as if throwing a dozen more plates onto the table was the simplest thing in the world. I moved through the kitchen with the precision of decades of practice, chopping, stirring, tasting, adjusting, all without pause. The lamb shoulder went into the oven at 6, portobello mushrooms stuffed by 7, hollandaise whisked for the asparagus by 8. Every dish carried memory of my late husband Raymond, of birthdays and graduations, of the silent hours I had spent in kitchens just like this, teaching myself to measure, to season, to create moments worth remembering. My back ached from leaning over cutting boards, my shoulders tight from reaching above stoves. Yet even with the physical strain, my hands moved with a rhythm I hadn't lost decades of discipline. Muscle memory, the unspoken language of love through food. After all this effort, would they even notice the difference between love and labor? By the time I pulled the next tray from the oven, Daniel had returned with coffee, still unaware that my morning had already begun and the real work was only halfway done. As I chopped the onions, the sharp scent brought me back decades, to the kitchen of my childhood home where my mother had moved too slowly for my impatience, and I had taken over the cooking before I even knew what freedom meant. I remembered the long nights after school, stirring sauces for my father and brothers, measuring flour for cakes I would never eat, learning that care was expressed through effort, not words. When Raymond and I married, I carried that same rhythm into our own home, cooking dinners for friends, colleagues, and family gatherings. Always before anyone else had asked, always unnoticed. I had celebrated birthdays and anniversaries for everyone but myself, measuring love in portions and flavors rather than in acknowledgement. My sacrifices had been quiet, my labor expected, and my appreciation almost non-existent. Even after Raymond passed, the kitchen remained my refuge, my voice in a world that seemed to forget me the moment I stepped back. I stirred the stock, tasted the sauce, and remembered the years of invisible service, the graduations I had fed, the parties I had orchestrated, the nights I had risen early to ensure every detail was perfect while others slept. Each dish was my language, each recipe a testament to a lifetime of devotion without recognition. Yet, as the aroma of simmering meat filled the kitchen, I realized how easy it had been to become invisible, how the gestures of love I had perfected were taken for granted. How long do you give before your love is mistaken for obligation? The timer on the oven buzzed, pulling me from memory and back into the relentless pace of the morning, where the next layer of preparation awaited. By 7, the kitchen was alive with the clatter of pans and the hum of ovens working overtime. I was simultaneously roasting vegetables, whisking hollandaise, and keeping a watchful eye on the lamb shoulder, timing each dish so that everything would finish in harmony. The stuffed portobellos were lined neatly on a tray, the twice-baked potatoes ready for the second oven, and the chocolate mousse was chilling in the fridge. Every movement was precise, a dance I had performed countless times. Yet the weight of expectation made it feel heavier than ever. Daniel wandered in again, yawning and carrying his coffee, as if the chaos around him were invisible. "Smells great in here," he said, pausing briefly before retreating to the living room. His obliviousness was exhausting, yet I kept my focus. Then Marielle appeared, checking her phone, casually suggesting, "Oh, maybe invite a few more people, just a handful friends from book club, the Hendersons." I froze for a second, then adjusted my prep list in my head. It was never just cooking, it was recalculating, stretching time, budget, and energy to accommodate everyone else's whims. I stirred, tasted, and corrected, noting how effortlessly I had learned to anticipate needs without acknowledgement. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory from decades of experience. Yet a gnawing frustration lingered beneath the rhythm. I remembered the letters of appreciation I had once received from local restaurants and community events, the only times my skills had been recognized outside this household. Those memories offered a faint spark of validation in a day dominated by disregard. Every addition, every comment, felt like another invisible weight pressing against my shoulders. Each time I adjusted a dish or measured a portion, it reminded me how unseen my labor had become. When your skill is ignored, does it still matter who benefits from it? The timer on the lamb oven rang, pulling me back into the present and signaling that the day was about to reach its first test of patience and resilience. Chapter 4. The Joke That Broke Me. By late afternoon, the house was filled with the chatter and laughter of guests, a cacophony that should have been celebratory, but felt suffocating. I carried the last tray of lamb to the dining room, carefully arranging the slices so that each plate looked perfect. Guests smiled and murmured their appreciation to Marielle, who accepted every compliment with a practiced air of elegance. I stood back, quietly observing, feeling the familiar ache of invisibility settle deep in my chest. Then it happened. Daniel, slightly tipsy from the wine he had been pouring for himself and his friends, leaned over and chuckled. "Well, if nobody wants seconds, we'll just feed it all to the dogs." Laughter erupted around him. Marielle giggled, her laugh musical, carefree, and entirely without awareness of the years I had poured into this meal. Every knife cut, every pot stirred, every ounce of money spent, every hour of waking at dawn, all of it was reduced to a joke. I froze, the serving spoon suspended in midair. My stomach twisted with humiliation, and a flush of anger burned through me. This wasn't just a joke. It was a dismissal of everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, everything that had been my quiet, unwavering expression of love. No one looked at me. No one seemed to notice that the woman who had orchestrated this feast, who had anticipated every flavor, every texture, every timing, was standing silently at the edge of the room, her heart pounding. The laughter continued, innocent in their eyes, cruel in its impact. Guests clinked glasses, complimented the decor, and carried on, oblivious to the rupture this moment had created in my world. The weight of being unseen, unheard, and undervalued compressed around me, and I realized that this was the culmination of decades of invisibility. Every long morning, every holiday, every birthday spent cooking while others took credit, was embodied in this single, casual dismissal. I stepped back, letting the spoon slip from my fingers onto the floor, my hands trembling, but my mind clear. I would no longer allow my labor, my care, my life to be treated as disposable. Would you stay silent when your effort is mocked? Or finally, walk away? I turned away from the dining room, the hum of conversation fading behind me as I began gathering the containers I would need to reclaim what had been taken for granted. I moved through the kitchen with deliberate calm, stacking the aluminum trays I had brought for leftovers: the lamb, roasted vegetables, stuffed mushrooms, and twice-baked potatoes slid smoothly into each container. Every slice, every piece accounted for. My hands shook slightly, but only with controlled energy. A focused response to the years of being unseen. I didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't ask permission. I simply began reclaiming what I had created. Through the doorway, I caught glimpses of Marielle speaking with a neighbor, gesturing toward the dining table as if she had orchestrated the feast herself. Daniel hovered nearby, a cup of wine in hand, eyebrows raised slightly as he noticed my purposeful movements. "What are you doing?" he asked. Curiosity mingled with concern. I didn't respond. The question wasn't important, and no answer would capture the depth of my resolve. Guests murmured among themselves as the trays disappeared from the buffet. Some noticed, their expressions a mixture of confusion and curiosity. But no one stopped me. The party continued around me, laughter and conversation filling the room, oblivious to the absence of the centerpiece of their meal, the weight I had carried the invisible hours, the careful calculations, the painstaking preparation, felt lighter with each tray I carried toward the door. I loaded the car slowly, methodically, as though moving through a ritual that both severed old patterns and established a new boundary. The drive away from the house was quiet, the city streets empty in the late afternoon light. With every turn, the tension that had coiled in my chest unspooled slightly, replaced by a new sensation, a clarity born of action, a quiet rebellion that required no applause. For the first time in years, I felt the power of my own decisions, the authority over my labor and my life that had long been deferred to the expectations of others. When the world takes your labor for granted, what's the right moment to reclaim it? The phone buzzed insistently in my purse, a familiar name flashing on the screen, signaling that a new challenge was about to emerge, one that would test my skills in ways the party never could. I pulled the car over as my phone buzzed again. Kenneth's name flashed across the screen, and a familiar tension gripped me. "Aunt Evelyn," he said, voice cracking. "I'm completely overwhelmed. Chef Nolan called out sick 20 minutes ago, and I have an 80-person wedding tonight. I don't know how I'll manage." I listened, the weight of the moment pressing in, but instead of panic, a strange clarity settled over me. The food I had packed, the hours I had labored, the skills I had honed over decades, they were no longer invisible. They were essential. Every recipe, every precise timing, every adjustment for 43 guests at a family party could be magnified for 80 at a wedding reception. "I can help," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I have everything you need. The lamb, vegetables, desserts I can repurpose them, and I'll guide your line cooks. You'll have a full service in 3 hours." Kenneth's relief was palpable through the phone. Instructions followed, ovens preheated, plating strategies discussed, ingredients organized. As I hung up, a surge of purpose replaced the hollow ache from earlier. For the first time in a long while, my labor had value beyond expectation, beyond family acknowledgement. This was more than a crisis. It was a chance to demonstrate that the skill and care I had poured into invisible work could create something indispensable for someone who truly needed it. What would you do if your discarded work became someone else's salvation? I pulled back onto the road, the city lights fading behind me as I headed toward Kenneth's restaurant, ready to reclaim my skill and my confidence in a way that mattered. Kenneth met me in the parking lot, pale and frantic, but the panic in his eyes sharpened my focus instead of breaking it. I unloaded the trays from my car and assessed the kitchen. 2 young line cooks, inexperienced with an event this size, looked at me uncertainly. I didn't hesitate. "We'll start with the lamb," I said. "Slice it thin, fan it on the plates. Roasted vegetables next, then potatoes, desserts last. Timing is everything." For the next 3 hours, the kitchen became a disciplined rhythm. I directed every movement, adjusting seasoning, rearranging trays, and teaching plating techniques on the fly. The line cooks followed my instructions, their initial skepticism giving way to awe as the plates began to resemble professional presentations. I repurposed each dish with careful precision, the lamb reheated and glazed, the vegetables refreshed, the chocolate mousse reshaped into individual tarts with the raspberries I had grabbed on my way. Guests began arriving just as the first trays were ready. I caught their eyes as they tasted the food. There were small gasps, murmurs of approval, smiles that carried real admiration. Kenneth's relief was tangible, his shoulders relaxing as he realized the wedding was salvaged. For the first time that day, and perhaps in years, I felt seen. My skill mattered here, my effort recognized without pretense. The confidence that had been buried under decades of invisible labor surged through me. I was no longer just a background presence. I was the reason the evening succeeded. Can a lifetime of hidden skill finally get the recognition it deserves? As the first plates returned to the kitchen, clean and empty, I knew this was only the beginning. What had started as a family disaster was becoming the opening for a new chapter in my life. After the last plate was cleared and the guests had left, Katie Ford approached me with a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. "Evelyn," she said, "the way you handled tonight, your leadership, your precision, your ability to organize and execute under pressure was exceptional. We need someone like you for our upcoming charity events." I listened, disbelief and excitement mingling in equal measure. She outlined the opportunity, a trial catering event for 40 donors, full creative control, use of professional kitchens, and compensation that far exceeded anything I had received for years of invisible labor. She slid a check across the counter, $5,000, more than I had held in my hands in a long time. The weight of recognition settled over me like a warm cloak. My skills, honed for decades, were finally being acknowledged by someone who understood their value. Every hour I had spent waking before sunrise, stirring sauces, and orchestrating meals for a family that never noticed it had led to this moment. As I tucked the check and contact information into my purse, I allowed myself to envision a future not defined by obligation or family expectation, a life where my labor and care could be appreciated, compensated, and respected, a life where I was the architect of my own choices and not merely a tool for someone else's convenience. If someone finally sees your worth, will you return to the life that undervalued you? I left the restaurant with a steady step and a clear mind, already thinking about the first event, the menus, and the clients who would finally see the work I had carried silently for so long. The next morning, Daniel and Marielle arrived unannounced, their expressions a mix of concern and confusion. "Evelyn, can we talk about Saturday night?" Daniel began, voice careful, as if testing the waters. Marielle added, "We didn't mean to hurt you. It was just a joke." I listened, letting their words wash over me without interruption. For decades, I had softened my responses, compromised my own time, and allowed my efforts to be treated as invisible. "Not this time. No," I said firmly. "It wasn't a joke to me. It was 12 hours of my life, my money, and my care. And it was treated as disposable." Marielle's smile faltered. Daniel's hands went into his pockets. "We didn't realize," he began, but I held up a hand. "You need to understand that from now on, I will not provide labor that goes unappreciated or unpaid. I will choose where and when I contribute. My work is not a tool for convenience. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of long-standing expectations now confronted. They looked at me, startled, as though they were seeing a version of me they had never known, a woman capable of saying no, of reclaiming authority over her own life. I continued packing my notes and planning for the upcoming event with Katie Ford. My decisions, my time, my effort belonged to me first. Their shock was a small price for autonomy, and I felt the tension shift. The balance of power subtly realigned. How do you balance love for family with respect for yourself? As I closed the door behind them, the afternoon sun fell across the kitchen table, where my future professional and self-directed waited, ready to be shaped by my own hands. Weeks later, I stood in a professional kitchen that belonged entirely to me, overseeing the preparation for a charity gala of 40 donors. The rhythm was familiar, yet exhilarating. The chopping, stirring, plating, and timing executed flawlessly under my own direction. Each event that followed a corporate dinner, a small wedding, a nonprofit fundraiser was a testament to the skill and dedication I had long given freely, now recognized and respected. Clients consulted me, thanked me personally, and offered compensation that reflected the value of my labor, rather than assuming it as a given. For the first time, my work carried weight outside the walls of my family home. The pride I felt was not merely professional. It was deeply personal. Every menu planned, every tray served, every detail perfected was a reclamation of the years I had devoted to others without acknowledgement. I reflected on the choices I had made, the boundaries I had set, and the dignity I had reclaimed. The freedom to decide how, when, and for whom I worked transformed not only my career, but the way I saw myself. The lessons of invisibility, sacrifice, and undervaluation were now tools for empowerment, guiding me toward a life shaped by respect, recognition, and self-worth. If you were in my place, would you choose recognition and independence over expectation and obligation? I walked between the stations, surveying the kitchen I had built, knowing that the life I had long dreamed of was finally mine to command.